snap is back to hold us down.
And it's good. Gulfport wins. Gulfport wins the title.
No time on the clock. The Golden Egg is coming to the coast.
Welcome to the HD Experience, your source for sports on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Here's your host, Hunter Dawkins.
My name is Hunter Dawkins, the host of the award-winning podcast, The HD Experience. This is the 48th episode of Mississippi Gulf Coast Sports Podcast, sponsored by the Gazebo Gazette, Harrison County's independent newspaper, the Beau Rivage Resort and Casino in Biloxi, Nine Toes Brewing Company in Pass Christian, O'Dwyer Realty Agent Stephanie Mankiewicz, Joseph Kelly, attorney at law, Coast Casual in Pass Christian, The Insurance Barn in Gulfport, Hook'em for Heroes Block Party happening on Saturday, September the 12th, and we're always in the U.S. Marine Inc. studio. I'm here with my wonderful producer of the show and my good friend, Jeff Clark. Jeff is a well-accomplished, award-winning journalist and the South Alabama beat writer, and as well the director of the Harrison County Senior Services. Jeff, how are you, my friend?
I'm well. We're still winning awards, Hunter. We just recently, you and I won one for this wonderful podcast. So it's always enjoy, when you say your friend and that we've won an award together. I'm well, man. It's been crazy hot, blah blah blah. But I do want to tell all of our listeners it's gonna be a special week. We're gonna drop 2 podcasts this week. We'll have our part 2 of the Sunbelt Media Days coming up, episode 47.5, and then we'll have this one as well. But football's in the air. I'm very excited to hear about your trip to Tampa for SEC Media Days.
Jeff, of course, as you mentioned, the theme for the day is the post-SEC Media Days. The SEC Media Days were hosted last week in Tampa at a beautiful Marriott on Water Street, which is right in the middle of it's in the heart of downtown Tampa. The guests we have here were each at the event, and which hosted all 16 teams of the SEC that are members, along with the coaches for each team and 3 players for each team. This was divided by 4 from each day from Monday through Thursday. There was a main stage that was hovered by ESPN and the SEC network, while right outside was the famous Radio Row, which featured every big sports station, and ESPN additionally hosting the SEC morning show and your favorite, Jeff, Paul Feinbaum. Every big time college football sports writer, radio personality, and national TV was there. The digital drive was set up right down the hall with a slot of the coaches and players to meet with the local media in meeting rooms around the corner. Jeff, for my 3rd year, it was truly an honor to be among the best, which is what each one of our guests is undoubtedly one of those. With every year, real drama was cooking up with the commissioners speaking about the reality of leaving the NCAA system, to Coach Pete Colding saying that everyone is tampering to a certain level, to John Sumrall talking about how bad he was beat by Ole Miss being the first coach to use some vulgarity. And then
I thought it would be Pete Golding. Like, I was betting on Pete to do it first.
Well,
and that's
Pete
where I
was
want
right
to
after
ask you.
Sumrall too.
He went after him. I thought Pete would be dropping the curse words first.
Exactly.
That's what I want to know about, man. Tell me about John Sumrall. That's what that's like seems to be the most interesting thing of this whole
deal. You'll hear that from our first guest, who had a great bit of conversation with him too. But then to your favorite thing was to Lane Kiffin relating to mortality by the death of Hulk Hogan. Every day made it more interesting. I look forward to talking with each guest, and Jeff, we'll get more into that.
How was Kiffin perceived? What I purposely not paid a lot of attention to his appearance.
Well, I will tell you this, Jeff. He spoke, and I looked on the data that was released by the SEC network. He spoke over 2,800 words, which by that meant he was controlling the narrative. So he didn't give the reporters much time to ask any questions. And he pretty much went back and forth on his own, as well, talking about the mortality, talking about his social media sabbatical, as well as talking about how the Nike is endorsing on the brand level of LSU, going into all these different details. But yes, you can better believe that we're going to talk to some guests about that stuff.
Right on. I'm also, I think Pete Golding and someone can talk about this. I'm sure Caleb or someone like gave a nice a nice little soliloquy about his relationship with Lane Kiffin and how much he appreciated him bringing him to Ole Miss and all that stuff. Yeah, I feel like I know it's always Lane's show, especially with Coach Saban, who did the opening or whatever was there. But with him being out of the picture, I just feel like it's Lane Kiffin's show now. But man, John Summerall and Pete Golding really made it interesting.
Yeah, definitely so. And each one, as we'll talk to our guests about, they put a little bit of, as you use the word soliloquy in right there. So.
All right, cool. We have some great guests today who were there, who we're dying to hear from. So let's go into our first commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Looking for trusted legal guidance on the Mississippi Gulf Coast? Joseph Kelly, attorney at law, has been serving the coast since 1993, helping families protect what matters most. From estate planning to securing your legacy, Joseph Kelly provides experienced, personalized legal services designed around your unique needs.
I'd love to introduce my first guest, the legendary college athletics sports editor for AL.com and an acclaimed AP sports writer, Creg Stephenson. How are you, my friend?
Leadoff spot. I don't know if I can handle that pressure. What's going on?
The first and most important question for all of the Alabama fans, including my producer, after hearing Coach DeBoer, who is quarterback number one?
Well, who should it be? It should be Keelan Russell. Who will it be? I'm less sure about that. The one point somebody made, I don't remember who it was exactly saying this, but it was a good point that if you start with the young guy, you can't really switch to the older guy. But if you start with the older guy, you can make that switch if you need to. So that makes me think that maybe Austin Mack is going to be the starter now. Again, it should be Keelan Russell, Keelan, which however pronounced it, I've heard it both ways. But um, I worry though, if you don't, he's a 5-star recruit, one of the top players in the country coming out of high school. If he doesn't win the job, he's going to get unhappy, and maybe he'll transfer, which you don't want to happen. So if it's me and they're close at all, I go Russell.
Well, with that being said, how much time or how much leeway are they going to give either
Well,
one?
the problem is, you got East Carolina the first game. You should win that. But the second game is at Kentucky, which, Kentucky's not great, but it's an SEC road game. So I think that would be kind of tough, if you don't think the guy's ready to throw him into that. So I'm not sure either one's going to have a very long leash because that week 2 game is going to be tougher than most times. And again, Kentucky's not great. They do have a new coach. I expect him to be pretty good on offense. He has former Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein, so I think they'll be solid offensively. So you're gonna have to score some points if you go up there. Um, so yeah, I don't. There's not a whole lot of runway for either guy.
From your feelings about DeBoer's remarks,
Yeah.
are the Crimson Tide close to getting back at least in the top level of the college football playoff?
It depends on what you mean by that. I mean, they won a playoff game. They lost to the national championship. Now they got blown to the national champion. Now they got blown out by them, but they did lose to the best team in the country. Had they played somebody else that round, maybe they advance another round. So, you know, will they ever be back to where they were with Saban? No. Were you competing for a national championship every year? I don't think that's realistic for anybody, to be honest with you. Except maybe Ohio State. They seem to be in it every year. But no, I think Alabama football is going to be what it was immediately in the years immediately after Bryant, where you're going to have be pretty good every year. You'll have a chance to compete for a national championship every couple of years. And, uh, but we're going to finish in the top five every year. I just don't think that's realistic, especially in the multi-team playoff era. It was a whole lot easier to win a national championship when all you had to do was beat two teams.
Talk to me about fixing the run game, which,
Yeah,
according to Kalen DeBoer,
yeah,
what if you had talked with him or if one of the reporters that you worked, you were putting together a story at least,
yeah.
what was the way that he spoke to you guys about fixing the run game?
Yeah, I think it's just the guys that are there have to get better. They do have some pretty highly touted second year guys, whether they're transfers or sophomores. Michael Carroll, really highly touted guy, got a lot of playing time last year. They're going to have a Jackson Lloyd, who's a redshirt freshman, is going to be the starting left tackle. So that's the biggest part of it. And the running back position, though, is kind of fascinating. I don't know if he'll get first carry first game, but I do think their best running back this year is probably going to wind up being E.J. Crowell, who's a true freshman. Now, it's not unheard of for a true freshman to be your guy. We've seen it in a lot of cases, even at Alabama. And Mark Ingram, Trent Richardson, T.J. Yeldon, all were big time players as freshmen. Derrick Henry was more of a backup as a freshman, but obviously became, a legendary player. So, I think he's probably the most talented guy there. He wasn't healthy in the spring. That was a big part of why we probably didn't see him take over. But you know, I think he's going to wind up being the guy. But yes, they definitely need to get that running game fixed. Is it something they're doing? Uh, I know they have more of their own guys there now. Saban recruited kind of the big road grader types, whereas DeBoer wants more mobile guys that can get out in space and pull and block and all that kind of stuff. And so I think they've recruited more to that. And so I would think we will probably see the best running game under DeBoer this year, potentially.
That's what I also too on the side, Craig, is another thing was that I heard there was more of a conditional use for guys that
Yeah.
the war's been recruiting instead of the physical assets, the more of your run block and things as such
Right.
like that. So anyway, Alex Galesh stated that he does not focus on win count goals.
Right.
And that was kind of a cohesive identity is the words that he used. What
Mhm.
does this mean to you, Craig?
Well, yeah, he's not going to say we need to win this kind of number of games or it will be a failure because then if you don't, then everybody says you're a failure. Now, I do think that the idea of I'm going to get my program in place and we're going to start making progress toward where we can be, that's pretty standard for a new coach. I do think, though, they need to get into a bowl game at least to be successful. They've had five straight losing seasons, although in two of those they made a bowl game and lost. But yeah, if they can win seven, I think that's a great year for Golish. And I do think the talent is there. He brought in all those South Florida guys that you would think they're at least comfortable running the offense. The question is, can they take a step up in competition? Offensive line was terrible last year. Can they improve that? The defense should be pretty good. Now, you got DJ Durkin back and a lot of talent on that side of the ball. So I think if they can finish with a winning record, then that is a successful year one for Alex Golish.
Well, and that was the final question of mine, but sort of a segue.
Yeah.
Have those I think it's 13 transfers from Central Florida. Will
South
that,
Florida. South
yeah,
Florida.
South Florida. Sorry, South Florida.
Yeah.
That help set the tone, or is it going to bring division in the
No,
team?
I think that well, most of the guys that would have been divisive are gone.
Yeah.
They all left. But he brought in Byron Brown as the main guy, but also the center, also most of the receivers and tight end. I think it's five receivers came from USF, and then some guys on the defensive side of the ball as well. So yeah, that's a good thing to me, and we've seen other coaches do that. When Signetti went to Indiana, he took a bunch of of the guys from James Madison with him, and those guys turned into great players at the Big Ten level, even though they were playing in the Sun Belt before. So maybe some of these guys Golish is bringing in from the American can succeed at the SEC level. I do. Byron Brown is obviously the key to all of this. We've seen him in spurts play really well. Alabama played him a couple of times, and he held his own, to be honest with you, when he was at USF. So if he can be a difference-making quarterback at this level, that's the biggest piece of all of this.
Really seriously, quick final question. I knew you had a conversation with Sumrall. At least that's
Yeah.
what you told me. What did he say, and where are they headed?
Yeah, I think they're going in the right direction. I really like the hire of Buster Faulkner. Is that the right name? That is the right name, right? Offensive
Yeah.
coordinator out of Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because in the past, that's been the criticism of Summerall is that his offense was kind of stagnant. They didn't score points in bunches when he was at Troy or at Tulane, and he knew that he had to make a bigger hire, a big splash hire. And Georgia Tech was a really good team last year, and so that's kind of the key. They're going to have it's going to be a lot of new. You always see this with first year coaches, and I probably should have said this about Golish as well. They may lose a game they probably shouldn't lose. Of course, we saw Saban lost to Louisiana Monroe. Kirby Smart lost to Vanderbilt back when Vanderbilt was bad. Kalen DeBoer lost to Vanderbilt when Vanderbilt was better. But I think again the situation with them, they were 4-8. I think if they can finish with a winning record, get in a bowl game, that's pretty successful. I'm a big believer in John Summerall, as you know. He has won everywhere he's been. He's played for the conference championship all 4 years now. Obviously, he's in a tougher conference now. He may not do that this year, but I do think he's going to succeed at this level. He's just too, intense and driven of a guy. I think. I think they're again. I don't think we're going to see Urban Meyer, Florida, immediately, but I do think they're going to be on an upward trajectory for real.
Tell everybody how they can contact you, my friend.
AL.com/sports, best way to do it. On Twitter/X at Creg Stephenson. I'm not on the radio anymore though, so they can't listen to me there.
You take care of yourself.
All right, man. Take care.
Mark your calendars for Saturday, September 12th, and head to Nine Toes Brewing Company in Pass Christian for the Hook 'em for Heroes block party. It's a free event from 1 to 10 p.m. featuring live performances by J.J. Gray and Mofro, Mark Broussard, Cedric Burnside, Honey Island Swamp Band, and more. Best of all, the event supports local veterans and first responders, so come enjoy great music while giving back to those who have served our communities.
The Gazebo Gazette is Harrison County's only independent newspaper, publishing news from Gulfport to Bay St. Louis every Friday. Hi, this is Hunter Dawkins, owner of the Gazebo Gazette. If you're looking for local news without the hassle of sorting through story after digital story, log on to thegazebogazette.com.
And now we will move to our next guest, who doesn't really need any introduction from me as my good friend and SuperTalk Mississippi news reporter, Caleb Sailors. Caleb covers all of the Mississippi colleges, along with all the news for the state's largest media syndicate, SuperTalk Mississippi News on supertalk.fm. And he has the statewide scoreboard show coming up here pretty soon, Friday night, to report all the local high school football scores. How are you, my friend?
Hunter, yeah, you're right. I'm doing great. Just thinking about all the football that's coming up. Kind of itching, getting ready for it, honestly. How about yourself?
That's right, my friend. That's right, my friend. I have an interview, of course, with the radio station next week, just kind of getting prepared for what's coming up here. While Ole Miss head coach Pete Golding noted that the university utilizes a robust compliance department to handle roster additions, yada, 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 he didn't openly deny tampering instead of related it to a job format. Talk to me about this.
Everybody tampers. I mean, that's just kind of the gist of it. If you're not tampering, you're not winning. And I think the coach that called Ole Miss out about tampering, Dabo Swinney, was one of the last ones to kind of adjust to the game. I mean, now, don't get me wrong. I can say this with 100% certainty that Clemson has tampered with players. Now, has Dabo Swinney specifically tampered? I won't go so far as to say that. But Yeah, I mean, if you look, tampering it's not new. I mean, even Pete Golding said, guys, this has been around for a very long time. I mean, it's a guy that coached with Saban at Bama, who knows all about tampering. I mean, the wheel has not been reinvented here. But I did think it was interesting, though, Hunter, to your question, and then to, I guess it was Dan Wolkin who asked the follow-up question, that there was no denial of tampering at all. He's like, well, I mean, if you're on the interstate driving 70 in the left lane and someone passes you in the right lane going 80, well, you're going to start speeding up a little bit because you don't want to get passed. And so, yeah, I mean, if you look at college football right now, you have players entering the portal with a do not contact tag. And then next thing you know, they're committing to a program. I mean, what's 1 + 1 always equals 2, right? So if you put the 1 and 1 together, that guy already had a deal in place before he even entered the transfer portal. Well, how does he have a deal in place if there's no tampering? I mean, it's just logical at this point. And really, I think Pete was able to say that on good authority because I don't think the NCAA is really going to be able to do anything drastically. Maybe a 1-game suspension that Ole Miss could apply to the Wofford game or the Charlotte game. But other than that, what are they going to do? Because everybody's doing it.
Pete stated that he would continue calling plays while performing head coaching duties. Is there any assistance to back up Pete, at least on the defensive side, or on the head coaching side, like Joe Judge or somebody like that on the staff?
So, yeah, Pete's going to call defensive plays. Obviously, offense will be called by John David Baker, and he's got a whole staff that'll help him, run the offense. Joe Judge, you mentioned, is kind of helping him with the day-to-day stuff. Joe Judge is dealing with the, developing quarterbacks, Trinidad Chambliss and Deuce Knight. Also some of the, if a player has a problem, a player has an issue with schoolwork or a personal issue, Joe Judge will be kind of the liaison. Tom Luke will be the liaison to deal with that. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, though, Brian Brown is co-defensive coordinator, and he's going to be working hand-in-hand with Pete. Brown's a guy that Ole Miss retained after Lane Kiffin left, which Pete retained an overwhelming majority of the defensive staff, and then they brought in Marcus Woodson, who's got familiarity with Mississippi. He played at Ole Miss from Mississippi, from the coast, and a guy that's got familiarity with SEC football. He coached at Arkansas prior to coaching at Ole Miss, and so there's plenty of guys. Pete talks about delegation, that he's an idea man. I mean, he's open to hearing ideas from other people, even suggestions on how he can run his program better. He said he's never going to be the guy that just shuts somebody down. He's always willing to listen. And if he thinks he's wrong and somebody else is right about something, he's more than happy to entertain it. But of course, he will continue calling the defense, kind of like Lane, how he and Charlie Weiss kind of called the offense together last year. And now Pete will do that, have Brian Brown assisting him. Randall Joyner will probably be able to give some feedback, and other coaches on staff. Then offense will be John David Baker, though. That is his offense.
Golding said he and Lane Kiffin were on good terms. You remember that very well.
Yeah.
Sitting right next to each other. They speak to each other all very often, is what he remarked. Is there something missing here?
No, Lane Kiffin's a unique guy. I'm not saying anything crazy or outlandish here. Lane Kiffin's form of texting, and I've gotten this on good sourcing. In fact, I've seen this firsthand. He likes to send voice recordings. So I guess these aren't as traceable. He can have them deleted, whatever, where he'll just tell you what he wants to text you. For those who are listening and not tuning in via video, I'm holding my phone up to my face. He'll do that. And I'm sure Pete gets several of those every week. And he said he kind of just picks and chooses what he responds to. But one thing that Pete did say that a lot of people didn't take notice of is that there are things that are off limits, though. There are things that he and Lane do not talk about. And I presume the Ole Miss football program is one of those things that Pete's like, hey, we're not talking about this. We're not going to talk about these coaches. We're not going to talk about these players. We're not going to talk about Keith Carter. We're not going to talk about Walker Jones. We can talk about football. We can talk about our kids. We can talk about our families, whatnot. We're not going to talk about these things. We're not going to talk about players either. We will not talk about recruits. We will draw the boundaries there. But yes, we can still be friends. The coaching fraternity is just that, Hunter. It's a fraternity. These guys all know each other. These guys have all been around each other. I mean, John Sumrall spoke extensively about how he and Pete Golding have known each other for a very long time and have gotten to know each other pretty well, though they've never coached together. They've been in the same circles. And so it stands to reason that Pete and Lane have formed a bond and formed a relationship. Again, this is what Pete saw Lane do. I'm sure there was a personal side of it, like, hey, he's leaving these kids high and dry. Like, this is crazy what he's doing right now. But on the flip side, it's a business, and they all have agents. They're represented by the same agency. Pete probably saw it as a business decision that Lane made, and it's not going to affect their friendship.
Do you think Will Eccles could be the next Chris Jones?
He's from the same city, went to the same high school. Hunter, that would be a very bold statement for me to make. That'd be very bold for me to say, Will Eccles is going to be the best defensive tackle in the NFL, because I think that's what Chris Jones is right now. Him and Jeffrey Simmons are probably 1-2 punch right now. I mean, there's other defensive tackles in the NFL that are really good. I can't go so far as to say that, Hunter. I think Will Eccles is confident that he could be the next Chris Jones. I think Will Eccles is confident that he could be the next big thing. I wrote a story last week from SEC Media Days, Hunter, about Will Eccles looking to be the next big defensive tackle from Mississippi. Mississippi State's kind of had that monopoly right there with Chris Jones, with Fletcher Cox, with Jeffrey Simmons. And now Will Eccles has a good opportunity to do that for Ole Miss. I don't know if he'll be the next Chris Jones, but man, I'll tell you what, though, if there's any way I could buy Will Eccles stock, I will buy it right now.
Who has the better year, Trinidad or Quan?
Trinidad, just because he does more. Obviously, he's going to have the passing yards. And now I will say I'm eager to see how Ole Miss's wide receiver core looks, because they lost a lot of production from Dejon Stripling and Trey Wallace. But I think Trinidad's such a veteran quarterback that he's able to kind of do it all, and he can figure it out as he goes and form chemistry with his new receivers. I will say Trinidad. I don't think Kewan Lacey is going to get as many carries as he did last year. Hunter, off record, or not off record, one of the things I've heard from a source is that one of the selling points to Kewan to keep him at Ole Miss was that he wouldn't get run to the ground like he did in Lane Kiffin's offense. And so I think Kewan's going to have a heck of a year. I had a concern that hamstring injury he had against Miami would linger, but I asked him face-to-face at Media Day if that injury was lingering. He said no, he feels perfectly fine, that he's not had any bad days. He's been good ever since then, so he feels 100%. I think he'll get fewer carries. Ole Miss brought in Mekhi Frazier, brought in Josh Dye, has a couple of running backs, JT Lindsey, one Shakai Mills-Knight, who was already on the roster last year. So they've got a lot of bodies in that room, so I would expect Kewan to get a lesser number of carries. Now, Trinidad, on the other hand, is going to be doing everything on the offense. I expect him to have as many, or if not more, all-purpose touchdowns than he did last year, and his numbers to be better because, again, he wasn't the starter for 2 weeks last year. He wasn't the starter until week 3 when Austin Simmons had gotten hurt and wasn't able to play anymore. So I think Trinidad will have 2 extra games to be able to build his stat sheet more. So when you talk about the Heisman campaign that Ole Miss is on, I think Trinidad is the better of the two in terms of percent chance to win it. But, I'm not going to count out Kewan Lacey either, though.
Final question. Give me a short summary of Jeff Lebby and what the state brought to the table.
Yeah, a lot of excitement behind Kamario Taylor. You look at him, you're like, man, this kid can be the next big thing. And then Kelly Jones, a very big defensive back who has potential to be a first-round NFL pick. Jeff Lebby, one thing that stood out to me is he talked about his roster, how he retained a lot of guys, how he retained a lot on the defensive side, how he brought in Zach Arnett to run that defense, because Coleman Hutzler had just, I hate to say it succinctly, but did an atrocious job running that defense. The numbers don't lie. And so they're bringing in a guy that has been a proven success at Mississippi State, a guy that knows how to run a defense. And I think Lebby said, this roster this year can go to toe-to-toe with anybody, that he's revamped the roster to the point where he knows that he's confident on game day, that his guys are as good as anybody's. Now, again, that's coach talking. The spectators will have to see. Hunter, me and you in the media will have to see if that comes to fruition. But another thing Lebby did too in the offseason was brought in former head coaches, Philip Montgomery. He brought in another one that can help him manage during game day. A lot of the criticism about Jeff Lebby last year was Mississippi State's inability to finish a ball game, right? They're driving to beat Florida. Shapen throws that interception. They are up 17 against Texas in the fourth quarter, lose the ball game, losing overtime to Tennessee. Now he's got some guys that have had some head coaching experience that can get in his ear and say, hey, Jeff, don't do this. Hey, Jeff, don't do that. So I think the big thing with Mississippi State is going to be to see how they finish off games, honestly. And then with Kamario Taylor, there's a lot of hype and a lot of excitement around the program. Can they live up to it?
Caleb, tell everybody how they can contact you.
Go to X, Caleb Sailors, STM. You can find me on all the other socials by just looking up my name. It's not a hard name to find. And most importantly, supertalk.fm.
Thank you, my friend. Look
Thanks,
forward
Hunter.
to you again.
Yes, sir.
Looking for insurance coverage you can count on? Call the Insurance Barn, a professional agency since 1959. The Insurance Barn writes all-in-one policies and offers coverage for homeowners, fire, flood, commercial property, auto, boats, motorcycles, plus wind and hail protection.
Nine Toes Brewing Company is a Gulf Coast destination for craft beer, great food, and interactive entertainment. Enjoy a rotating selection of small batch brews, a menu of comfort food favorites, and state-of-the-art golf simulators featuring world-famous courses.
Now I would like to introduce my good friend, program director, and radio host of 103.7 Lafayette and 104.1 Lake Charles, Raymond Partsch. Raymond, is there any reason why Coach Lane Kiffin gave a plus 2,800 word statement with the most discussion ever on the stage of the SEC Media Days, or was it just to dodge multiple questions?
It was, in one word, Hunter, a filibuster. I mean, it was a strategic thing. You and I talked about this at SEC Media Days in Tampa, and thank you for having me on. It was done with intention, right? The off season that he had, and seemingly every time he sat down for an interview, every time he talked to the media, every time something happened, it became this momentous occasion. It became headline-grabbing news. I think it was done with so much intention because he didn't want his appearance to blow up, right? I think he needed that. I think LSU needed that. And I think he didn't want to have this big, huge distraction as they get ready for fall camp. I really think the Vanity Fair article switched a little bit inside of him because shortly after we have his son, which he admits to us at Media Days during that 20-minute filibuster, that it was his son that challenged him to get off of social media, where he hasn't been since May 11th. So, not to say that this is like a more mature version of Lane Kiffin, but it was definitely strategic. It was probably the most people we saw inside the big room all week, media-wise. And the fact that we only were able to ask 4 questions was disappointing. But I wasn't surprised. Like, when I started, looking at my watch, right, and I went, uh-oh, I see what he's doing. I even told one of my guys that he came with me from the station, I says, he's going to talk as long as he can. And maybe he talks a little bit longer if he doesn't get asked about the Vanity Fair article, which he did on question number 2.
That's right.
And as soon as that happened, I was like, he's done. He's done. Now, I'll give him credit. It's a fair question. Yeah. And I didn't mind he didn't shy away from it, right? He
didn't.
He didn't shy away from it. He didn't shy away from the fact that he's handled things the wrong way.
But he kind of used his agent, Jimmy Sexton, said, you should talk to him. He gets you a job.
Well, he does a very, very smart thing. The further he goes along, the more lessons he's learned from Nick Saban on how to deal with the media at Media Days, right? The older Lane gets, the more I see a little bit more of Nick in him over and over again. You make the crowd laugh. You make the room laugh. All of a sudden that deflates everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you pay a compliment, you get the laugh, and then he stumbled a little bit, but I thought he did a nice job overall. It was a more measured approach by him. Do I think we'll see him back at Media Days, actually on Radio Row, maybe doing more questions up at the big podium next year? Probably. But everything is so raw, so nuclear between him and Ole Miss. And I want to give credit to not only Lane for kind of admitting that, what he was trying to do, it didn't work. And that's great. But I also think he should give a big assist to Pete Golding on Wednesday. Because I think Pete reduced the temperature in the room as well with the fact that him and Lane are still friends and they still text. And he made a joke about what it's like. And So I think his friend Pete, who also was on staff at Alabama, right? Another Alabama disciple of Nick Saban, kind of eased things for when Lane took to the stage on Thursday. I think he handled himself well. He didn't shy away from any questions. He's naturally seems like an anxious person as it is. He's always nervy, right? Like he's always a little
fidgety,
twitchy, right?
Yeah.
Right. I don't think standing in a room full of people, media people, is his thing. I don't think he's naturally comfortable doing that. But I thought he did a nice job, all in all. But you were able to tell more from talking to the players, which we were able to do.
Yeah.
And they came by and visited us on Radio Row. And when we asked them about their coach, and when we asked them about their coaching staff, they gave us more than Lane did, but that's not to be necessarily unexpected.
He highly praised the LSU brand and spoke candidly about having 12 players with Nike deals.
Hmm?
Is this a recruiting tool?
Lane's always recruiting.
Yeah.
So, and I'll say this. Of course, it's a recruiting tool.
Yeah.
Like every time a coach opens their mouth in this modern era that we live in, where NIL is prominent, where we have football rosters that are north of $40 million, as we do this year with LSU in Texas, where guys are transferring at the whim. Even if they do have an NIL collective agreement, they still leave, right? You have to be recruiting 24/7. So every time you open your mouth as a head coach, when you speak to the media, and it can be consumed on ESPN, on the SEC network, on whatever channel you get theirs, on social media, you're making a pitch. You're representing yourself, and you're making a pitch because these kids have their phone in their hand. These kids are on social media. These kids that you're trying to recruit and their agents are all over. So if you're not doing that, you're going to get left behind, right? And unless you already have an established brand. But we've already seen guys like Dabo Sweeney struggle with this. Doesn't matter what your brand is. Doesn't matter how much success you have. Doesn't matter how many national championships you have on the wall. That doesn't matter. You got to know how to recruit today, right now, the way it needs to be done. So Lane's kind of built for that. Like, it's a funny thing for a guy that's had so many stops and had so many things kind of go wrong. It's kind of given him the experience needed how to deal with this type of environment, right? Like,
Yeah.
to be able to adjust on the fly, to be able to start over in a heartbeat. So he's kind of built for this in a weird way. So yes, Lane is always recruiting. And look, you don't come to the LSU job knowing the pressure that it is going to be at LSU. Knowing that the expectations, which I don't agree with what the expectations were discussed by the national folks in Tampa this past week. I think it's a little bit less than that. But when you're a brand, when you're part of a brand, when you have the roster that you have, when you have the amount of money being spent on their roster, when you cause a firestorm with what you try to do at your old job to come to your new job, when you talk to, first of all, Vanity Fair, like, I'm still trying to wrap my brain, or it wasn't like Sports Illustrated. It was it was Vanity Fair. When you do all of that, the spotlight is on you. So I just think Lane knows how to equip himself with how to navigate those waters, if you will. And I think, so of course he's mentioning that, because think about it. Even if just one kid watched that and said, "Man, that's cool, they got Nike." Boom. Just one kid. So if making that one comment gets you a 5-star blue chip prospect out of Texas or Louisiana or Florida to come and play for you at LSU because you mentioned Nike, guess what? It's a success, right? Like, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And I think he understands how to appeal to that modern athlete.
Now, this is the final question I've got for you, but I've been meaning to ask you this for the longest time because I was thinking about it when you were over there talking to Sankey. I was I was thinking, I said, can you explain Lane's feeling of mortality with the death of his father and Hulk Hogan?
Well, so the only thing that would have made that better if he would have done a Hogan impression and would have gone, "Brother, we all gonna die." You would have done something like that.
Yeah.
Lane Train Mania gonna run wild. If he would have done a Hogan impression, that would. But it just goes to show you kind of like he's kind of a quirky guy. Like my dad would call him an odd duck, right?
Yeah.
Like so he's just different. In it reminds me sometimes, even though they have wildly different personalities. Mike Leach was 101, right? Like there was no one else like him.
Yep.
He was an odd duck, right? So sometimes we have these personalities, and Lane's kind of, he goes off on this tangent about his dad. Of course, we know how much his dad means to him, even now after so many years that Monty's passed.
Sure.
I was not expecting the biggest wrestling star of all time, the man that told us to, eat our vitamins and do all that good stuff, to be folded into that. But it also, the other thing, Hunter, that stood out to me is like, you mentioned that moment, and that's kind of a funny moment. But you know what else he mentioned when he was up at the podium was, and I wrote it down. It was expectations, push you out of your comfort. And I think that gives you a little bit of a peek into Lane. Think about his career. So much of it is uncomfortability, right? So much of it is expectations and being uncomfortable. And that kind of makes sense. Like, he could have stayed in Oxford for a decade, another decade. He could have never won a national title. They probably would have built him a statue. Win 10 games a year, make the playoff 3-4 times, something like that. I mean, he could have done that. That would have been the comfortable thing. He got sober in Oxford. He reconnected with his ex-wife in Oxford. He built a stronger relationship with his kids in Oxford. He settled down. He matured. He got comfortable in Oxford. And then the opportunity presents itself for him to be uncomfortable yet again. And so when he mentioned that, like a light bulb goes off. It goes, this is how this guy's wired. Like, this guy's wired to constantly be putting himself in uncomfortable situations to see if he can rise above that, to see if he can conquer the uncomfortability of new challenges, of being in pressure situations. And he's all about jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, right into the fire, rather. And it's just a little bit of an like I don't want to get too, like, I don't know, get too deep on this, but it's a little peek into the psyche of Lane Kiffin, where it's like, push myself because I want to be uncomfortable. So where most of us look at things and we go, we want to get to a point, you and I, Hunter, we want to get to a point in our careers where we can make so much money, and then we can earn accolades, and we can have time off to spend with our family. And I want to be able to build an addition to my house, or get a pool for the kids, or put away a college fund for my daughter, or so forth and so forth, right? So we look at it a little bit differently. We're like, oh, well, I got this job, and it provides me with this security, and I can be comfortable in it.
Sure.
Lane is letting you know that he's not built that way. He wants a little bit of chaos. He wants a little bit of things to be fiery. Will that work out in the end at LSU? We'll see. Do I think national championship or bust, which was a big talking point with, on Digital Drive, Radio Row? I think that's silly. In year one, that's silly. I think by year 3, that's different. I think making the playoffs should be the expectation for the LSU Tigers this year. With the roster they have, with the payroll they have, with the coaching staff they have, Baker, Corey Raymond on the defensive side of the, brings in Charlie Rice Jr. to help him on the offensive side. It should be college football playoff. That, I think, should be the realistic expectation. National championship or bust, I think that's silly. I think that's national narrative wanting to go after Lane because he's rubbed so many people the wrong way. But I do think the expectation for us media in Louisiana is that this should be a playoff team. The expectation for the fans here that are diehard purple and gold fans is this should be at least a playoff team. If they're 9-3 and miss the playoff, there's going to be some upset folks. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. That schedule does them no favors.
Raymond, tell everybody how they get in contact with you.
You can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, of course, RP3_sports. You can also watch my show, RP3 and Mesh, and all of our live and local shows on ESPN Southwest Louisiana by looking at our YouTube channel, ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Just subscribe and click on the alerts. Not only do we live stream all of our local shows, we also put up original content.
We thank you, my friend.
Thank you, bud.
Take care.
Looking for effortless style on the coast? Discover Coast Casual in the Pass, your locally owned men's and boys' boutique. Coast Casual offers a mix of coastal and southern-inspired clothing, accessories, and gifts.
United States Marine Inc. knows what it means to show up strong. Your grit and teamwork inspire us every day. At USMI, we cherish our family, and our family includes community and you. USMI builds the baddest boats with pride and coastal toughness.
Now, I would like to introduce my final guest, who is one of the best in the business, the advocate of Baton Rouge sportswriter, Scott Rabelais. Scott, how are you, my friend? Why is Lane Kiffin against the 9-game SEC schedule in 2026, at least from what he told you or what he told the rest of the media?
About the 9-game schedule?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you asked me why is he not in favor of it?
Yes, that's correct.
I think that's a lot of SEC coaches. Like they expected if the SEC was going to a 9-game conference schedule plus the requirement to play a Power 4 opponent, that they were going to have an expanded college football playoff, expanded beyond the 12 teams, which it is right now. And obviously that has not happened yet. I mean, I think everyone expects that it will. Go to 16 teams or 24 teams. Of course, the other conferences are endorsing 24 teams. The other power conferences are endorsing a 24-team playoff, and the SEC is still, holding back. But I think that was the expectation. And I think the coach was like, "Whoa, this makes it harder." I mean, we saw a 9-3 Texas team that's was very highly regarded, didn't make it last year. The 10-2 Vanderbilt team didn't make it out of the SEC last year either. So the coach is looking at there's going to be 4 more losses for somebody in the conference this year with an extra conference game on the schedule. So and they all know as well as I feel it's very pass fail now. You make the playoff, you've had a good season. If you don't, you failed. And I think Lane Kiffin in his first year at LSU is in that position as much as anyone. So I can understand their opposition to it. And look, they all want an easier path. I mean, every coach does. Whether we'll see the Power 4 requirement go away, I don't know. I mean, that's LSU just canceled a home and home for about four years in the future with Arizona State. That's a Power 4 team that's going away. They do have a home and home with SMU coming up, of course. Game in Baton Rouge and a game at the Cowboys Stadium. So we'll see how all that goes. Like I said, I think the playoff will expand eventually. But for now, it's left the SEC schools and the SEC coaches in a little tougher spot for sure.
Scott, how long do you feel like that Coach Kiffin is going to be on this social media sabbatical, at least from what he said?
Well, it's been a long time for Lane. It's been over 2 months. I think he's posted once on his X account, and it's that's a long time. In Lane Kiffin years, that's a long time. He gave his explanation for it. He said his son Knox challenged him, said, "Dad, you're on social media a lot," and I saw him. Of course, we weren't able to hear it while he was doing it live, but I watched the video of him talking to Nick Saban and the other people on the SEC network podium at Media Days on Thursday, and he said, Coach Kiffin, Coach Saban, you were never on social media, and I'm sure that's true. So I don't know. I think he's got. I think he's going to find it very hard to resist, considering how much he's been on there before, and he loves sticking the needle in. Look, as I think people are finding out, being at a podium and speaking to a group of people is not his favorite way to interact. His favorite way of communicating is through things like social media, and certainly crafting an offense. And I'm talking like Lane Kiffin now. I'm moving my hands as I speak, but doing those kind of things. So I think he'll probably be back on it. But he has shown remarkable restraint, and since the whole kerfuffle happened with the Vanity Fair article saying what he said about Ole Miss, that it's difficult to recruit there because of the past civil rights issues they've had in Mississippi. He didn't back down from that. He said his choice of words was poor, his timing was poor. We didn't back down from it. Since then, this is kind of like, I think it also probably kind of prompted him to say, maybe I need to throttle it back a little bit. But I expect he'll be back on there. If he doesn't have something aimed at the Ole Miss people leading up to the Ole Miss game on September 19th, I'd be very surprised.
Scott, he highly praised the LSU brand and spoke candidly about 12 players being on the Nike deal. Was this a recruiting tool, or was this what method was this for? What reasoning was behind this?
Okay, you're asking about the 12 players getting the Nike deals, and what was the second part? I'm sorry.
Was this a recruiting tool, or was this some measure that Lane was trying to go after, the other SEC coaches a little bit? I'm not sure what he was meaning on for that.
Well, I mean, he said, and we're just going by what he said, that LSU is the only has the most of any school in the country with players with these deals with 12. The next was 8, and that included Jordan Seaton, an offensive tackle who transferred from Colorado. Sure, it's a recruiting tool, and sure, it's something you can use against other schools in the conference. I mean, it's all fair game. But I think it's an example of three things. They brought in good players and retained good players at LSU. Whit Weeks, returning linebacker, of course, is one of those 12. LSU has a very popular and powerful brand to begin with, and then you add the whole Lane Kiffin factor. That's the whole thing. I think he has only added to it. I don't think it would be this many. I don't care how good they are. I don't think it would be this many players if it wasn't for Lane Kiffin being part of the mix. I think he just ups the wattage on LSU's brand and what they can do and what they can give in return to Nike. And LSU's always been a Nike school, for forever and ever. So it was kind of a natural deal, but at the same time, they're not just doing this because they just happen to like are fans of LSU at Nike. There is because they feel like they're getting something in return, especially with Lane Kiffin. It just raises the profile of the LSU brand and for those players and for Nike, and it's obviously a win-win for everything. So that was a very interesting component, and he certainly made a point of saying it, as you said, at media days.
What's the view of the LSU defense after hearing from Whit Weeks and TJ Daugherty? Just seeing where the defense is going to be this year as compared to last year, which was a pretty rough defensive year for them.
The LSU defense, obviously, it was big to get Blake Baker to come back. I mean, that was, of all the retention they did with getting Whit Weeks to play for another year, and obviously anyone can go in the portal. DJ Pickett to return at cornerback, and that sort of thing. PJ Woodland. Getting Blake Baker back for another year with most of his staff intact. Corey Raymond coming back to coach the defensive backs, and of course Ed Orgeron is going to have some influence. I'm sure he's not an on the field position coach, but he's a tremendous defensive line coach, and he brings that acumen to the staff as a special assistant to the head coach. So look, the defense we all know was abysmal in 2023 when they had this great offense, built around Jaden Daniels, number one in the country. And it's gotten progressively better under Baker over the last couple of years. But you expect the offense is going to be really good, with Lane Kiffin. I mean, I think the status of they had 4 of the best 4 of the 5 best offensive years in Ole Miss history were during Lane's 6 years at Oxford. So you expect to get the average like 500. They led the nation, I don't know, in total yardage over that time, like total combined yardage, or however you want to look at it, yards per game. They led the nation in that over his tenure at Ole Miss. So it's the defense doesn't have to be super great. I wouldn't think, but they just need to be, respectable, forcing turnovers and causing sacks. And, that's a lot of defense today in college football is, creating the negative plays for the other team to have to overcome. And maybe they punt and they give you the ball in good field position and away an offense goes. But I expect, it's just got to come together. It's just, they obviously have some great pieces, with bringing in like a Princewell, Unman, I'm still learning how to say his name, Unman Miguelan, and somebody like, to play linebacker like TJ Dottery, who's probably going to be the starting linebacker next to Whit Weeks, and like a Ty Benefield in the backfield. But you got to have that chemistry, man. You got to know that the guy, if you're playing safety, you got to know when you hand off the receiver comes through your area and you're handing him off to the cornerback, that, or vice versa, that he's going to be able to cover him. And that you got to know that, if you're dropping back into coverage, that's, somebody else is got the running back coming out of the backfield and that sort of thing. So it's the chemistry and the trust that's so important on defense. And they got a lot of new pieces, obviously. That, I figured they could have let's see, at least 6 new starters on defense. So that's a lot, and then obviously the contributors. But it's the pieces are there if they can just get them all going in the same direction.
Final thoughts. Do you have a take on the mortality feeling that Lane Kiffin related to his father and Hulk Hogan?
One more time, I'm sorry.
Final thoughts. Do you have a take on what the statement that he made about the mortality rates, especially looking into the past history with his father and Hulk Hogan both passing at the same time?
That was unusual. That was unusual. Obviously, his dad, was Monty Kiffin, was this legendary defensive coach, and he's synonymous with Tampa. I mean, the Tampa 2 defense, right? That's when he was with the Tampa Bay Bucks, and when he got there, I think it's right around the time Lane was beginning his coaching career. Then, he's late. A lot of people like to say, well, Lane's he's kind of odd. He says some odd things. He says, and that was a very different kind of quote. I don't think anyone else said anything like that, bringing up his late father and the late Hulk Hogan, at the same time, but 2 people that were on his mind. But he, when he says stuff, it's usually something interesting, and it can be very, he can be very introspective. He was talking about the thing he said about giving up or getting off of social media the last couple of months as he has. He said he's found as he gets older, and he's 51 now, he's not the same kid who was coaching the Oakland Raiders back in the day. He says, I've learned this best sometimes to add by subtraction as you get older. He said, I've done away with alcohol. He mentioned that, and eating better and toxic relationships. Didn't say what he meant by that, but and so I think he realizes that he's gotten to a point in his career and his life where the clock's ticking a little bit. He's not going to be doing this probably for another 30 years. He might not be doing this as long as he's done it already. So it's he's thinking about all those things and his legacy and whatever. And people say, if people want to say, oh, Lane Kiffin, he's just going to come to LSU and he's going to leave for the NFL, he's going to leave them high and dry like the NFL admits. Maybe. I mean, he's obviously jumped around a lot in his career. Or maybe he gets to the point like Nick Saban did. Nick Saban had never been anywhere more than 5 years when he went to Alabama. And then he stayed for 18 years. He just decided, this is the place I want to be. I don't need to go anywhere else. And we shall see. But I think he's thinking about all those things and what his legacy is going to be as a football coach. And obviously, number one is winning a national championship. And whether it's this year, as Jordan Rodgers has alluded to, they need to play for that championship. I don't know. He says, Lane has said himself, they're going to win one in his time in Baton Rouge. So we shall see when that happens. But he's definitely thinking about his legacy and maybe changing the narrative on how he's perceived. And we all want to be liked, we all want to be liked to different degrees. And so I think he's thinking about all that, but certainly about, how he's eventually going to be perceived, and can he change that narrative in his time at LSU? This will be fascinating to watch.
Tell the audience, sir, how they can contact you.
Well, of course, all our stuff is at theadvocate.com and NOLA.com, and the same on both websites. And then I'm on X at Rabelais ADV. So RABALAIS ADV. And all our stuff is, if you want to read a few articles, you can get them. Eventually there'll be a paywall, but if you want to read a few articles leading up to like the Ole Miss game or the season opener, we'll have lots of coverage. We got like 5 of us covering LSU sports. So lots of coverage and lots of in-depth stuff. And we hope people will give us a look.
We thank you, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you are thinking about selling on your own, maybe ask Steph. If you would like to talk to Stephanie to help determine your next steps, call today at 228-563-0471 or call her at the office and ask for Steph at 228-452-4242. Fully appreciate you listening to this podcast, and we thank you again, Jeff. We want to thank all of our sponsors, including the Beau Rivage Resort and Casino in Biloxi, Nine Toes Brewing Company in Pass Christian, O'Dwyer Realty Agent Stephanie Mankiewicz, Joseph Kelly, Attorney at Law, Coast Casual in Pass Christian, the Insurance Barn in Gulfport, Hook 'em for Heroes Block Party, and the U.S. Marine Inc. studio that we are currently in. Make sure you follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube under the Gazebo Gazette Productions. Jeff, it was a good show.
Man, I tell you what, it's probably, I say it every week, but the amount of information that I learned today is probably one of my top 5 favorite shows in the past year or almost year. Whew. A lot of great information, man. A lot of stuff.
There was definitely some stalwarts, and it was definitely fun being among those. And I definitely hope that we get the opportunity. Is next year it will be in Nashville, and I'll see what I can do to see if we can make the opportunity to be there.
Boy, I sure do love going to Nashville. Also, you know what, Hunter? The next time you and I record the HD Experience, it will be in August. We're here. We're getting there. That'll put us about 28 days out from college football.
That's right.
That means jamborees will be starting up soon. That means we're, less than a month or a month away from the Gazebo Gazette Oyster Bowl?
That's right. And we're getting up close to the year of this podcast.
Yeah, we are, man. And we'll have to do something special for that. Next month, literally at the end of next month, I'll be heading to Mobile. I think their first game's an away game, but I'll be going to Mobile in less than a month. It's
That's
crazy.
right. And we had the conversation last week was posted about the Sun Belt, and that was obviously you'd had some personal conversation with the Major and the kids that showed up, and we're looking forward to seeing it.
Kentrell Bullock gone, big piece of the pie. If you can replace the running game, if they could find a way to close games, which they struggled with last year. I saw them get up many, many times and then lose it, like on not so great decisions in the end of the fourth quarter. So just close the games, man.
No, Jeff, that's why the preseason, the July and August is always the greatest, because you feel like you're undefeated. It's 0-0. You got your everything coming back for you. You can come out there and you can change it. And that's the way
everybody's starting out the season 0 with no wins, no losses, 0-0. So cool. Be sure and follow us subscribe to the HD Experience on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, on any of your podcast spots. And like Hunter said, subscribe to us on YouTube under Gazebo Gazette Productions.
Or on the award-winning website, the gazebogazette.com, where the podcast will be posted sometime next week, as well as on Facebook.com/The Real Gazebo Gazette, or on X at Gazebo Gazette as the handle. The HD Experience, as my favorite producer and one of my good friends, Jeff, said, is available on all podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music under the HD Experience tag. Signing out, this is Hunter Dawkins, the host of the HD Experience. We'll catch you on the flip side.